First of all, I would like to thank Mushin and the organizers for setting up such a nice list of topics to talk about, and also including this very relevant topic. And it's a pleasure to welcome the very eminent co-panelists here, who have, as you will see, very rich experience in this field. And I look forward to hearing your views on this and discussing these concepts with you. To start out with, maybe we could go around and have a very quick round of introductions. I will call upon each panelist to quickly and shortly introduce themselves. If I may, Felicia Byrne, who is from Medical Systems Kantonsspital, Aarau. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hello together. My name is Felice Byrne. I'm head of AI and Data Science Center of Excellence at the Cantonal Hospital in Aarau in Switzerland.
Thank you. Welcome. Next, I would like to call upon Yacine Hadiat to say a few words.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for this opportunity. I'm glad to be here. My name is Yacine Hadiat, and I'm from France, based in Paris, and global head for the digital health solution for the digital unit of Biogen Biotech, dedicated to neuroscience and technology, neurotech innovation.
Thank you. Welcome. Next, could Chris Rawls, please, could you say a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Bagmeet. Good day, everybody. Great to be part of this panel, to see all the practitioners, and also to listen to some of the sessions. Really, really interesting. I'm field CTO here at Cloudera, a technologist by heart, but did some academic research in artificial intelligence many years ago, focused really on social and social interactions and aspects of, I suppose, law. So that's my background, and I've spent a lot of time in the ML space. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Welcome. Next, Gorgie Shakirin, could you please say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Bahmet. So I'm Gorgie Shakirin. I'm heading AI at Zeiss Meditech, mainly focusing on the full chain from research up to productization of different AI algorithms in our Zeiss ecosystem. Thanks.
Welcome. And next, I would like to call upon Samit Bahinipati to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. So Samit Bahinipati from Boehringer Ingelheim, work as a lead business architect and driving the organization around becoming a data-centric organization. So that's me.
Thank you. Welcome. And in the end, I'm Bagmeet Behra. I'm a senior manager in data science, working with the observational research and digital analytics team in Amgen, which is a biopharma company. And I'm based out of Berlin. I've been working with the pharma companies or in healthcare for the last 4 years, and I have a lot of different experiences before, working in research for quite a long time, and then in industries doing data science related activities. So I'm very happy to be here. And today, what we are going to talk about is the concepts of trustworthiness, explainability, and usability in terms of AI applications with relation to healthcare devices and solutions. And before we dig into what this is, maybe one way to look at it is to look at who are the different users and what could be the different people who are interacting with these devices. From that point of view, Felice, would you like to throw some light on that in terms of what does transparency and trustworthiness mean?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Trustworthiness, there are multiple terms that play an important role with trustworthiness of an AI systems. And only a few deal really with the AI model or algorithm. And others are more about the whole ecosystem and integration and organizational background where these AI systems comes in place. There, for example, on the data level, AI models in healthcare institutions are often built on secondary data, labeled data. So you have another reason or source where you rely on decisions that made before in terms of before the training of the model that can have an effect of the quality and decisions. Also, yeah, data quality, the relevance and the representativeness, and if the data are complete or well balanced. On the basis of a AI system, it's the reproducibility and robustness, also the limitations of the system. And then important role is the output of the AI model, which should be approved or monitored by another system. And in healthcare environment, this is usually like a doctor who has the accountability to take the decision and also legally needs to be at the end responsible and approve the decision or decline.
Right. So yeah, thank you very much. So that gives a lot of different perspectives, especially from the doctor's perspective, what it means at the end to be able to take the decisions from the AI and see whether they can trust it to take some actions on it or not. Maybe Yacine, would you like to? Yacine, could you like to say something about what trustworthiness means when you're on the side of maybe developing or promoting some medical devices?
Sure. I mean, that's a broad topic, and without breaking it down, indeed, it will get even more complex in the discussion. At least from a little perspective on what we're trying to do with AI and data, there are multiple applications, at least, that we are going after. One being to embark AI in some of our medical devices and patient solutions, and the other one, if I want to keep it simple, is how we work on our AI power machine in our R&D systems and our internal data. So just to add some potential customers to the mix. So Phyllis mentioned about more decision support kind of algorithm and data-driven actions, and indeed the personas are quite clear. If I add the devices that are customer facing, I would say for now that it's more or less what we're doing, more a soft touch in terms of personalization of the experience itself, learning from a user and sending back a loop of activities and interventions. And the way a user would trust and rely on some of suggestions would start by being very basic behavior of, does that make sense? Or is totally off and done as a recommendation? We do have the same interaction with either our Netflix or Amazon or whatsoever. But so here I'm putting really a persona, which is a consumer-driven solution with a personalization integration, right? When I go to the other extreme, for example, in R&D and data-driven activities, that's a much deeper discussion, much deeper, because it's about the whole ecosystem that we need then to reconsider and complexify, because then data will start from data labeling equality, architecture, the recipe and your algorithm, and then the output, and circling back in what you are putting as a valid ecosystem for an AI-driven R&D. I'm taking just those two examples and I leave the floor, but consumer-driven AI simple integration all the way to more R&D big data ecosystem and architecture kind of AI activities.
Thank you. Yeah, that does indeed tell us that there is a wide variety of perspectives to look at, a lot of things to take into account. So maybe taking it a bit further and thinking about what is the current awareness of what needs to be in the system, whether there is acceptability or fear among not just users, but among developers of that. Chris, would you like to share your experience or your perspective on that aspect?
Yeah, sure. Let's make this concrete. I'm a stroke survivor. 2 years ago, I suffered a catastrophic event in my life from a healthcare perspective. This morning, I spent 2 hours in the hospital on a routine test. So the presentation earlier about quality in pre-filled syringes, very relevant to my event this morning. Also, the drugs that I take every day, they're metered based on a machine learning algorithm. So when I take the drugs and how much of those drugs I take is informed to the nurse by software. And it's been trained on a particular set of models, and it takes into account various things such as, you know, my current state, and also things like the things I eat, and all the way through to changes in other medication. And so data for me, as I think Leanne actually said it on one of her slides, genuinely, I believe it saves lives. When it comes down to trustworthiness, I didn't really have a choice. If I take on the role of the patient in this conversation, I don't have a choice really. I have to go into the hospital, and at some point, I have to trust the decisions that have been made, because I'm being advised to do a certain thing. And every now and again, I'll be told to do something different. So I think in that context, we have to recognize that however data is captured, however it's utilized, trustworthiness must be foundational, because patients are at a moment of, I suppose, vulnerability, and they might not necessarily have all of the information they need to determine whether their data is being used in the right way. So trust has to be fundamental, in my opinion, given what I've gone through in my life. And so, you know, when I step back, we apply that within our own organization as a vendor. When we think about data, it's really about making it easy and accessible in all aspects. So that's probably how I'd start this conversation, if that's okay, and then hand over to the practitioners to sort of dig into that, if that's reasonable.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing that perspective and sharing that personal experience. I mean, that is indeed the key. In the end, in your case, you said that you had no choice, but there are a lot of devices where we want to monitor, let's say, chronic patients and get more data, which helps then particular interventions to be more timely, to be more effective, right? So in that context, and extending what Chris was saying, Georgie, do you have anything you would like to add and share to that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I think the very important aspect, of course, is try to make the decisions which AI takes explainable to the doctors. And I think the nice example we also saw yesterday in the lecture of the colleague from GE on the breast cancer. So just to say the patient is suspicious is not very informative. If you show what is exactly was the reason for that, if you segment the lesions and show the shape and structure and texture of that, and show it to the doctor, then I think you really then gain trust in the model, and it also helps doctor then to accept the decision of AI. So I think where it's possible, it's not always possible to do the steps. We need to do that to explain why the algorithm takes one or another decision.
Excellent, thank you. That does tell us, right, that transparency, be it for the patients or the users who might be the doctors, is one of the key factors. We want to be able to explain what is happening, why certain decisions are being made. So yeah, that sort of joins back to what Felice was saying in the beginning as well, of how AI should be explainable. If I may now pivot a bit to what more do we need, to ensure that there is trustworthiness and explainability built in. Samit, would you like to say something on that?
Sure. So whenever it comes to about building the trustworthiness and increasing the maturity of the data, so in healthcare, we have heaps of data, not like the banking and all, like which comes with the other regulations, but it is more pristine and the heaps of data is present in the healthcare. So exposing the data at the domain level means maybe a data domain, which is more of an data-centric perspective rather than being an application-centric, and having the data domain owners on the top of it, making sure that the data is available in a catalog, where the data can be voted, the percentage of trustworthiness can be shown out. So not only the people within the domain, but across the organizations can look at it and they can say, hey, I trust this data. They can put in their ratings and maybe build some dashboards on the top of it, which could be the starting point of any AI operations that can be provided to the end customers. Maybe like for us, we have scientists who deal with our data, so they can look at the dashboards. They can see, okay, so can I trust this data or can I cannot trust this data? Are there any improvements that need to be done, like a single point where we can provide a 360 view of the data with all the integrating points across which the data has been shared?
Excellent. So that means while developing AI systems, look at the atomic units which goes in there. That is all the data. Give wide access so that a lot more eyeballs could be on the data, and then we can catch early on if there are any signs which say there is something missing or something not right about the data, and then take that.
Absolutely,
right.
like providing access to the data and making it more trustworthiness, along with the proper governance principles and the fair principles that has to run on the data. Otherwise, it is meaningless. The data is just a data swamp.
Yeah. Then I would like to just open up now to talk a bit more on this topic of what do we need? How do we implement this in different ways, and what else is needed, right? Anybody wants to jump in and add their own perspectives here?
Yeah, I can say something on that. Maybe also beside the AI model and system, when you implement an AI solution, healthcare environment especially, you need to have like guardrails that you define. There need to be a AI governance and compliance regulatory aspects that need to be followed. It's not just do what you can or what the technique can deliver. It needs to fit in an accountable system. This also deals with trustworthiness.
I would also like to make a point here that generally I propagate and I advocate about it. Like, rather than having an application-centric data, if we have data domain owners who are responsible for the data that they are owning, because these are the guys who are closer to the data and they understand from where the data has been produced, who is consuming the data, and they can define all the sharing terminologies on the top of the data to ensure that the data being consumed by any consumer is having a proper reason to how long the data has to be consumed and what is the purpose why they need to consume this data. So it helps in maturing the data levels, not only at the producer level, but also at the consumption level, which makes them more responsible whenever they start using the data from any domain, maybe for any business purpose or maybe to build a new application on the top of it.
Okay. Right. So the data is obviously a very big aspect, and the quality is key. I'm wondering what could developers do in terms of making the data, and not just the data, the algorithms and the modeling more reproducible. Let's say more peer-reviewed, in a sense that gives the regulatory authorities, the users, more confidence that this is not just from one entity which has been developed and nobody else has seen it. So how do we trust it? Maybe there are more ways to do this. Any thoughts on that, Chris or Georgie?
Certainly, from a technical implementation perspective, and that's where we spend much of our time, helping organizations manage vast amounts of data. Managing vast amounts of data, whether it's in volume or in flow, is really a solved problem. Where we're really focused on now is the metadata that goes along with it. And when you think in terms of that metadata, it's the point in time or state of information, and information either as raw data, as features, or as models, being able to fully version all of that so that not only can you evidence at the point of research when you're going from the lab to production, but you can also, once in production, maintain all of that as a working system. And you can go back, I think the comment earlier was model drift or data drift. This is certainly something that you have to be aware of early. And so we refer to things like day zero, things you have to get done right first time, things like security, governance, going beyond lineage to things like provenance. What that means is lineage is the history of what happened. That might not be enough. You might need to go into provenance, which is the full version of what happened at a point in time, so that when things good happen, you can prove that. When things bad happen, you can also prove that as well. So you've got that ability to go in and do sort of forensic analysis of what happened, both in the machine learning model itself, in the processes upstream from that, all the processes downstream. So I think it's really important to think in terms of the metadata and the reproducibility in that respect. And we're seeing that demand not just in life science, but in other areas as well. So cybersecurity being a good example, but in life science very much in order to get the validation of the model, it's absolutely critical to have all of that in place. And it's not something you bolt on later. It's exceptionally difficult to do that. Just like security, you can't bolt it on later. It has to be there out of the gate, right the first day you start the work. So you've got that full history of what's been built and why.
Yeah, absolutely agree to that. So we really need to have a full transparency on the full life cycle, starting from, first experimenting, how we collect the data, how we move to the models, how we validate them, how we integrate it into the products, and then also post-production surveillance. So feedback from the users, feedback from the doctors on how model performs, and also make it, as public as possible, engage doctors in making publication, public it in peer-reviewed journals. I think this kind of feedback and scientific evidence also helps then patients at the end of the day understand, okay, this is something meaningful, and it's not a black box done by some company to do something with my data. So I think that's quite important.
Excellent point, both, and thanks, Gorgie, for sharing that perspective. Yeah, developing of AI is done on retrospective historical data, but then we need to validate it on prospective data, on getting information about how is it really working in the real world, right? So that is an excellent point. Thank you. And then this also tells us that it seems to be like a collective responsibility of everybody involved, right? Not just the developers, but the users. From that point of view, Yashin, would you like to say something about where do you think is going to be this all development and this scenario in the future in terms of not just how to develop it, but who is responsible and how do we? What do you think is going to be in the future like?
I think the future we will have first a time effect in terms of maturity of the entire ecosystem. I would add to the last point that we discussed also the role of regulators and policy that will bring structure, clarity on the data management, on the algorithms play, on the transparency, and also potentially to a point where the economical ecosystem would also evolve and make it also positive and productive. There is also a question maturity of the creativity of the developers themselves, including ourselves, on the digital age and digital promise. We need to reach a certain balance between what AI triggers as fears, all the way to what AI triggers as fuzzy overpromises. There is something in between, which is concrete, framed, and shaped in the right way. Transparency will help. Humility will help, and policy regulators will help. And the adoption is there. Sometimes it's done passively, sometimes it's active, but the adoption will continue to be there, I believe, as long as we get to this collective maturity altogether. So we understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what is coming as an output.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else wants to share their view of what the future would be like?
I totally agree with Yasin's comment about just managing the AI hype, I think. Because people experience that in different ways. But I wanted to kind of come back to Samit's comment as well, because there's two things tied together here. Samit was talking about domains and maybe data as product and thinking in those terms. It's well rehearsed in human nature. We know how to do that. And one of the areas I'm really focused on at the moment is how to help organizations scale. But more interestingly, the skills in this domain are so, I suppose, so being developed and kind of ahead of the curve in terms of the skill pool that we can draw from. We need to make sure we can apply those right skills at the right time, at the right place. So I really wanted to kind of come back to Samit's comment as well on how do you build these, what might be termed a data fabric or a data mesh, not just to manage your data, but to also be able to scale it throughout your organization and become a more effective organization and effective system as well. That's certainly a topic that that we're spending a lot of time on at the moment, helping organizations in that space.
Great. Those are all very important topics, of course, and critical to the success of the development. So I would like to still leave some time for questions from the audience, from the viewers, but I do not see any questions. So maybe one quick, or let's say very short last few words from each of you to round up our discussion, and then we can open up for any questions. So again, Felicia, would you like to go in first?
Yeah, as I said, bring trustworthiness together with governance and compliance and regulations. When you integrate AI solutions in healthcare environment, understand very well what are the needs and the pain points of the doctors, understand the processes. It helps to bring these techniques in the right place and also fulfill trustworthiness and reliability, robustness.
Yeah. Samit.
So as I said, make the data available so people understand the value that is associated with the data and make the data meaningful. Just don't tell like, okay, it is the customer here, is the patient data. No one understands it. If it comes from CRM systems like XXX and everything, it is encoded. So put in the meat on the top of the data so that people who are consuming it understand, they value the data that they are going to use, as well as understand the responsibility that they own whenever they consume the data, produce or share the data.
Okay, thank you. So add context, share widely, and you make the best use. Yashin.
I mean, it's an exciting era, times. The possibilities are absolutely amazing, but with what AI is giving us as a power. Without citing just a movie, but with great powers comes great responsibilities, and it will take this maturity, transparency, trustworthiness to deliver up to their promises, and we are still in that journey.
Absolutely, thank you, Chris.
As a vendor and as a patient, what I'd say is really think in terms of how you bring the skills to bear on your data. And we use a term, FAIR, F-A-I-R. So your data should be findable, should be accessible, it should be interoperable, open, and it should be reusable. Thinking in those terms is a really simple acronym to think on, but those should be the foundations on which you build. Then train for data skills. Think in terms of how you build that literacy within your business. That will then help you be more productive around your data. The other comment I'd make as well is with something like AI, machine learning, it's not getting out the lab to production anymore. It's not time to value anymore. It's the aftercare, almost like the patient life cycle. It's what do you do with that model after it's deployed? Some of the machine learning models I've come across are generating millions of pounds of value for a business. You can't just switch it off, or in this case, keeping people alive. So think in terms of how those machine models are maintained after they're built. It's not just the build stage that's most important. The operational stage. So that's probably where I'd leave with the audience, and certainly just to encourage, please open to questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. But I would like to give Gorgie one chance to add a few words at the end if he wants.
Yeah, just to, I totally agree with everything what was said. So I think also it's very important to show the evidence, to be open in that sense, publish it, show the representatives of the data, and that we don't have any bias in our AI solutions, which we put into production to serve the doctors and patients.
Great, thank you. Yeah. So openness and a lot of responsibility in handling how we do this. Thank you very much, everyone, for sharing your views.